are into the Passion Week still, right? He came in, Hosanna, the palms on the floor, and I mean they were just celebrating. So I want us to get right into it. Once again, same thought. We're going to read the first 14 verses. And again, keep in mind, if you were here last week, he's still in the same setting, talking to the same people, all right? And it says this, it said, and Jesus answered and spoke to them again by parables and said, actually, I want to go back to verse 46, okay? It says, but when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitudes because they took him for a prophet. He had just admonished them about rejecting the stone, right? So that they're sitting there fuming, right? And they can't lay hands on them because, after all, they're politicians. They don't want to upset the status quo. And as they're sitting there seeming, it's almost like Jesus going, and another thing, right? So he still has their attention. And Jesus answered and spoke to them again by parables and said, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son. What's going on, brother? Hi. Patriots, I'm telling you, man. Sorry for that online. That's weird. Anyway, verse 2, sorry. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. Again, he sent out other servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious. And he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. And so he said to him, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. So this is the parable of the wedding feast. Any of you ever heard this parable? Read about this parable? Kind of broke it down and kind of understand a little bit of what he's saying, right? Because he's still in the same frame of thought, right? So again, he's still addressing them, and he has just told them basically they were rejecting the stone. And at one point, he even asked them, and we'll get to it a little later on. He asked them, "What should the vine dresser do?" And here is a king, right? So in this situation, the king was throwing a great banquet for his son. His son's getting married, and he's basically inviting the who's who of society. Now, keep in mind, we can't, some people like to put this story into a non-vernacular, and it really doesn't translate that way, because if you invite somebody to a wedding and they don't come, it's not the same as a king in those days, the context, because technically everybody that he invited are still subjects. They just live better, right? They got better status. So for them to reject the king in that context, if you ever seen movies where they have a king and they have a court and all that, it's a no-no, right? And yet they did it. So this is a situation where he's inviting the people that matter, right? And he's saying, my son is getting married and you are invited to the wedding. So that's, everybody as important is wanting to come, right? But instead what he gets is excuses, right? They let me see here. Did I? There you go. So they get excuses. It was too busy, too indignant, right? too important to bother. Basically, this is the king's hospitality and opportunity to attend a great royal feast. So again, not to accept is outrageous. And in essence, not to accept as a subject of the king in a kingdom is dangerous, not just outrageous, but dangerous, And obviously they were not in any hurry or importance to attend, right? So they had disdain for this king, for the son, and the king is like getting upset. So what does he do? He says, go back out there. And in verse 4, he sends his servants out again. He goes, go back out there and tell them that I have prepared a great feast. Maybe they didn't quite understand you the first time, right? This is a wedding. So this is a feast, right? So we're going to have a beautiful buffet, right? We can relate, right? As a person who eats, right? A beautiful buffet. If you can imagine a kingdom putting out a spread, and he tells the servants, explain to them what awaits them, right? I mean, he's killed. If you read here, it says, the oxen, the fatted cattle for us, the cabrito, all that stuff, right? Matter of fact, for us, we would probably attend if it looked something like this right here, right? So, I mean, let's face it, right? So, but even then to reject that, right? Something's got to be wrong, right? You got to have some serious problems, right? So he says, go out there and tell them what we got. And still what? No takers, right? They each had their own thing they were going to do, And he's upset. As a matter of fact, they even went so far as to just not even decline, but then they started killing and beating the servants, Now this story has some familiarity, this parable, to last week's parable into who the players are in this situation. I'm going to explain again what they are, right? So 5:6 again, they seized the servants and they treated them spitefully and killed them. And now in the other one, he was a little grateful, but here, this is the king, guys, and the king himself, right? He's got every right to do what he needs to do. So when we put the parable together, this is what we have to realize, right? That God is the king in this parable, okay? God is the king. Heaven is the feast, right? And I can't wait for that feast, So heaven is the feast. Jesus is the bridegroom, right? Did I put that on? Yep. Bridegroom, okay? The servants are the prophets. These are the people that are, hey, kill, beat up the messenger, and I'm just the messenger, right? And obviously, Israel, which is our religious leaders, are the chosen citizens. These are the people that were invited to welcome the Son, okay? So again, he got spurned, they killed his servants, and the king is like, we're not having that, right? The king is angered. The king is angered. And here you can tell in verse 7 what he did with that anger. When he heard about it, he was furious, right? If we can go back to verse 41 of last week, when they asked him again, what do you think that the landowner should do? The vineyard owner should do, right? And they responded with a little, hello, you here for the Spanish or English? Okay, good. So this is their response to this, right? But what we have to realize that in this parable, with the king, getting mad and doing that judgment, is a judgment that's coming upon Israel. It's just a glimpse of what's actually going to take place. Some scholars and commentaries believe that part of that is the destruction of the temple in AD 70, right? But we're not going to get into that. So this is an angry king, So what does he do then? He destroys them. He's a mad king. And then he turns around and he tells his servants, you know what? Go back out there, forget those people. And now I want you to just invite everyone else out there, right? Because these people are not worthy, right? They are not worthy. So invite, verse 8, right? It says, go on to the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So again, he's opening up the doors to his kingdom, right? To the everyday Joe. Okay, this big thing coming up here, right? So then all of a sudden, guess what? they fill up the hall with all these people. They're happy to come. The king's throwing a ball, homeless people and street people. And yeah, they saw that buffet, they figured out what he was doing. And sure enough, he filled up the hall. So that is a picture, an illustration really of what we can see, right? In terms of everyone being included in that. And then he has some weird things that happen in verse 10. Okay. Some weird things. So as we go back into this line right here, once again, is the people that are not that didn't come, now they're unworthy. He has deemed them unworthy because they didn't accept the invitation. See how that translates to us when we reject, right? What salvation, when we reject the King, when we reject Jesus, we are unworthy, right? By our own works, by our own admission, we don't accept it. We are unworthy. Okay. And then the verse itself talks about, and verse 10 talks about the good and the bad. Notice he mentioned that part. And why does he mention that? Okay. Well, sinners, when saved by grace, they're washed in righteousness, right? However, these people, because they weren't part of the religious crew, so they were considered either good or bad, depending on whether they followed the law or not. And when he opened it up to the Gentiles, we definitely know the Gentiles were treated as bad. So verse 10 mentions that good and bad. It's not that they were terrible sinners. It's just what they were marked as by the religious leaders. So he was showing them those people that you said were bad, and those people that you supposed to claim were good, all of them come together, and because they've accepted my invitation, they're able to come in and partake in that blessing, right? But then something strange happens in this all these people that show up, right? There's one gentleman that shows up, and it's interesting how he points it out right here, verse 11. He saw a man who did not have a wedding garment. So commentators, they mentioned that in those times when the king threw a feast, he also gave out attire for them to attend. He wanted a uniform thing, and we've seen some brides that'll say, hey, listen, if you come to my wedding, you got to wear this kind of color because it's going to clash. You know what I'm saying? Right? So this is the ultimate, and it's true, right? If a king says, I want a certain aesthetic because I deserve it, I'm the king, then he's going to provide that. So this gentleman shows up and he doesn't have the wedding garment. So in other words, it was either given to him and he refused to wear it, and he just snuck in, right? How did he sneak in? Because he didn't look like everybody else. He did not at all fit in, and he clashed because the king's walking around and goes, whoa, look at that. And then he calls him in the next verse, he calls him my friend, right? Calls him friend. He goes, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And the guy was speechless. He got caught basically red-handed, right? And we're wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? Okay. Again, he's opened up. If we know that the buffet and the event is represents the kingdom, then somebody coming in the wrong garments means what? That they're haven't accepted it fully, right? This is one of those, you have prophesied in my name, you call out demons in my name, all that, but sorry, depart from me, for I know you not. You work iniquity. In other words, you are not clothed in the robe of righteousness that the king has provided, right? So you try to sneak in. Now, some people say that maybe his stuff was so dirty and it didn't quite was up to the standards, and he shouldn't have been in there. He should have maybe worked a little harder to make sure his garments somehow fit along with everybody else's. But in the big scheme of things, that's a works-based idea that he can do something on his own and try to get into this buffet. And obviously that doesn't happen, So what in this situation happened is the garment of righteousness. We read it in Isaiah 61:10. And remember, when Jesus mentions anything, he's referencing Old Testament law, right? So he and then of course he adds what it should be, what they should understand it as. So here, the gentleman is not wearing the right clothes. Therefore, he's not clothed in righteousness, and what the king has provided for him, he refuses that. So Isaiah 61:10 talks about the garment of salvation and what it should look like, the righteousness, right? So everybody else says, however, he is not, So, and it's very easy to understand that God's standard for entrance into his presence has to be what? Perfection, right? He has mentioned it from the beginning of Matthew all the way through. Perfection. You have to be perfect. Can we be perfect? No. Perfect righteousness, and no human being other than Jesus ever achieved this. Obviously, we read about that. Only those who come to God, covered by the righteousness of Jesus through faith in him, will receive God's gracious welcome into eternity. So the wedding garment represents the righteousness of the Son who is loved by the King. You guys see how that fits right there in that parable, right? So this basically, this gentleman was just going through the motions, haven't really accepted the free gift that the king and the son were offering him, And what does he do? He sends him. The king says, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and what? Cast him in outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, right? So he's referencing there what happens to the other side of the coin when you don't have the security of salvation, which is what? Being separated from God, right? Being separated from God. And then he goes into verse 14, for many are called, right? Many are called, but few are chosen, okay? Now, this is interesting right here because, again, a lot of religions are born from, bad theology is born from the wrong understanding of Scripture. And this is one of them that is sometimes taken out of context, right? So many are called, but few are chosen. And when you think about that, we are called, children of God. But there's something that we have to do on our own, which is accept that calling from God by us accepting the free gift, right? This is not a what was? Did everybody get that alert? Okay, this is not that Calvinistic view that only those that God has chosen are called and everybody else is not. So there is, in fact, a sense of tension between these two ideas. Okay, we have to realize that these two ideas that occur between the chosen, right, and the elect, right? So basically, on one side, you have God's choice of those who will enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, he is basically opening it up and says they are unworthy, so I'm going to open it up to them, right? He's going to choose them, but they still, each person that went still has to make that choice to attend that wedding, right? So it almost seems like it's two opposing things, but it's really not. They are not contradictory at all. Those elected by God will believe, and yet those elected will believe by their own choice. That's that free will that God gives us, right? And here's just some additional scripture that'll kind of point to what we're talking about, that you can actually attribute it to not Calvinism, however, a free will and grace that he provides for us. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that. Everybody kind of get that picture of what that is, right? Okay, good. So here we go. We're going to continue on. Again, same thought, same people. And this is interesting right here, okay? We're going to read verses 15 to 22. I love this part. We're getting further into some great stuff right here, which is great, okay? And it says this, then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth. Nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why do you test me, you hypocrite? Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, Whose image and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard these words, they marveled and left them and went their way. Okay. We have all heard those verses too, right? I mean, truly understand what he's talking there. They're trying to trip him up. Okay. First of all, again, I mentioned the group of people. He's got these. He doesn't just have the Pharisees. He's got the lawyers. He's got the Herodians. He's got the Sadducees, and they're all trying to find something to trip him up. And if you can't do it, I'm next. And if you can't do it, I'm next. And that seems to be happening here, particularly fast and furious in this chapter. So I want to talk a little bit about the Herodians. Okay, this is a different sect of people. They're Jewish people. However, these are sellouts when you think about it, right? They believe that the best interest of Judaism lay in cooperation with the Romans. Anything the Caesars want, they are willing to do. So they'll turn over anybody for the sake of being in good standing with the Roman emperor and the governors and all that. Their name was taken from Herod the Great, who sought to Romanize the Palestine in his day. They were, in fact, a political party. Okay, so these were the I mean, people who didn't stand for anything. They just wanted something for their own. And, Caesar was grateful to have people like this because he could use them, manipulate them any way he wanted. Okay. So these are the people that are asking him. Now, if they are for Caesar, if they are for the government, and they ask Jesus this question, what do you think they're trying to do? Stir the pot, right? They figure, hey, okay. Let's see, because they know that whatever he says, they're going to go back and tell that, right? They're going to go back and tell, okay? And I love the way they do these backhanded compliments, right? Where it says, teacher, you know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth. Coming from people like that, please. You know what I'm saying? Please. Yeah, bless your heart. Better yet. These backhanded compliments that are sometimes insults, right? Have you ever had those? Have you ever been insulted to the point that you realized a couple days later that was actually an insult, right? Right? Things like this. I can see you are committed to your current level of understanding. Right? How about, I'm jealous of everyone that hasn't met you. All right? I know, right? This is good. He goes, thank you for helping me. He was like doing it myself, only harder. Right? These are compliments. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, okay. Right? I admire your courage to speak in the absence of knowledge. Smart, right? Your food for thought leaves everyone still hungry. I know, right? It's impossible to underestimate you. I refuse to engage in a battle of wits with an unarmed man. Right? I know. As an outsider, what are your views on intelligence? And last but not least, don't let my knowledge get in the way of your confidence, right? So well-planned insults, backhanded insults. And it says, listen, you're a great teacher and you teach the way of God and truth, and nor do you care what anyone says, right? So they're trying to kind of do this fake lift up, and then they drop it. It goes, what do you think, right, about Caesar? Is it lawful to pay Caesar or not, right? And right there, verse 18, what does it say that Jesus sees? Their wickedness, right? It's like, please, please, I can reverse all these back to them, right? So I'm going to take a little trip here, okay? Is it lawful to pay to Caesar, okay? This is a denarius that we're using at the time. In Roman times, they had to use the coins for that government. Everybody else, there were different other coins. That's why the marketplace was also an issue and a problem with Jesus, right? They had to exchange money. There were money changers there, and you heard that in Matthew, right? But they needed, while they're there, because of the Roman economy, they needed the denarius. So as you can see, these are the front and the back of the denarius. Okay, so first the front part had a picture of Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. So that was the current Caesar at the time. Okay, so they had a picture of the Caesar on one side, and then on the flip side, this was Pax, the Roman goddess of peace, with the words high priest. Now, for the Jews to carry anything other, an image of a god other than the true God that they worship was an abomination for them. So they were kind of interested about this question, should we? Because they're carrying something they shouldn't be touching, you know? They're very strict about, particularly the Pharisees. That's why the Pharisees sent in this Herodians, because they figure, hey, you got a goddess on the other side. What's he going to say? If Jesus says, no, you shouldn't pay it because of that goddess, then they'll run to Caesar and voila, we got him, right? Or if he says, yes, you should pay the taxes, then their own people are going to rise up because he's telling them basically it's okay to touch a coin with a goddess other than your God, right? So you see how they were trying to trip them up, And this is a beautiful part because Jesus sees that. He sees their wickedness. He knows the genesis of the question that's happening, right? So he says, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar and to God the things that are God. You'll find them in this other verses as well, okay? And the answer itself, right, it's a perfect answer. Because before that, he says, why do you test me, right? Why do you test me, you hypocrites? He's talking to them about who they are, the Herodians, because they are hypocrites. They're there for their own thing, right? But it says, look at the picture. Whose is it? Give it to Caesar, right? Give it to Caesar. And basically, in Romans 13:1, we are to be subject to the local government, right? We are to follow, right, the laws that we live around, as long as those laws don't contradict with the laws of God, right? So technically, if the coin is Caesar's, then we're going to use it for commerce around Caesar, So he's basically bringing it back to them. If we owe Caesar that which bears his image, what then do we owe God? So if you're looking at that coin and it's got Caesar's image on it, then give it back to him, right? But then he puts it on there, and to God render those things that are God's. So remember, the other side of the coin, there's two images on that coin, right? He's talking about the image itself. So he brings it more in a deeper sense, because we're talking about two images, but you are not in that image. You are in the image of God. Therefore, if this is the image of Caesar, then you give it back to Caesar. But if you are in the image of God, what do you do with yourself? You give yourself to God. So you render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and you give yourself to God, right? Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. So we owe that which bears the image of God to give ourselves to that who made us, right? Can't refute that comment, right? Cannot refute it, He didn't answer the question. He went above and beyond on that because they were stumped. They were stumped. They marveled and left them and went on their way. The Herodians didn't know what to report. They were like, okay, right? And the Pharisees are like, oh, okay, next, right? Oh, it gets good. It gets good, okay? So then who's up next to bat? The Sadducees, right? They come on up, right? Let's go ahead and read verses 28 to 33. Okay, 28 to 33. So now they're 0 for 2, really. Yeah, they're 0 for like whatever. But right now in this chapter, they're 0 for 2. Okay, let's see if they can get a win right here. Okay, here we go. Verses 23 to 33. Here we go. The same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now, there were with us 7 brothers. The first died after he had married, and having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. Likewise, the second also, and the third, even to the 7th. Give me a second here. Okay. Even to the 7th. Perfect. Sorry, I was checking something. So even to the 7th, 27. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said to them, You are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Right? So now again, the Sadducees are up. Okay. And it's funny they're asking about a resurrection issue when they themselves don't believe in the resurrection. Okay. They don't believe in angels. They don't believe in the afterlife. What their belief is that once you die, that's it. You know? Now they still believe in the law. As a matter of fact, for them, they hold true to the first 5 books. That's what the Sadducees do. Anything after the 5 books, it doesn't quite fall into their thing. So that's what they do, right? So right off the bat, a group that doesn't believe in resurrection and angels ask a question about resurrection and angels, okay? Another gotcha moment that they're trying to do, okay? So in case you don't know this, if you've never been to one of my lessons, we'll just break down. This is kind of, just a real quick look at it, the differences between the two groups, okay? Now, they're still religious leaders, but the Sadducees were more, they're more on the politician side. They probably have better money, you know, and they controlled a lot more, right? But this was the main difference between the two themselves, okay? So again, they ask them, they go through this scenario, right? And they ask them, listen, whose wife will she be, right? Whose wife will she be? I mean, 7 brothers, poor woman, you know? And what we gotta think about here again is the Sadducees. When I talk about all they believed on is the first 5 books, so they themselves are quoting scripture to Jesus in a way, and Jesus sends it right back to them with the comment where it says, "You are mistaken, not knowing the scripture." Right? Not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. In other words, have you not read anything? You know, what's happening here? So they are, and Jesus is going to the law, to the word, right? In Deuteronomy 25:5, it talks, there's a story when brothers dwell together and one of them dies without a son, the widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother is to take her as wife and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law for her. Part of the Mosaic law. Now that wasn't law. That was, you know, in terms of taking care. Now, if you read further into that, it actually stops at a certain point. It's not the way they say it, but they wanted to kind of quote that in there, right? In Genesis, this is a strange story. If you ever read the whole thing, okay, it's a little graphic and a little nasty, but basically. Says, Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife, perform your duty as her brother-in-law, and raise up offspring for your brother. In other words, she was married to your brother, therefore you have a duty, right? Well, Onan here is like, oh, no, I don't think so. So before he does the deed, he actually empties himself out on the floor, right? If you can kind of picture this. And because he did that, he was killed because he didn't fulfill his duty, right? So here, again, putting that context, here's the Sadducees trying to trip him up, right? Listen, it's in the law, right? It's in the law. And then Jesus is like, oh, man, you are mistaken, okay? So the challenge is meant to show that human resurrection is ridiculous within the context of the law of Moses. That's what they were trying to do, and that's what they were trying to trip them, right? And again, he comes right back. Is you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. This is something that you read, something that you live, something you teach people, something you expect people to know, yet you know neither, right? You know neither. He is the word, you know, he is the word. Now here we're going to get into a couple of weird situational theological things, okay? Because some people, you know, it's a thing where they want to believe certain things, and sometimes scriptures can be harsh, right? But we're talking about marriage here. What happens when a husband and wife are no longer together in this world, right? In this scenario, it was 7 brothers and the wife. who was she married to? Well, obviously, Jesus is like, there is no marriage in heaven, okay? Which means this, okay? Husbands and wives are not reunited in marriage, okay? They're not. There is some theology and teaching that says that you'll meet up your partner, right? And listen, I know losing somebody dear and near who's been with you for so long, and you're thinking, I'm going to see them again, and that's great, but you're going to see them again in a different setting, not in a love setting the way you had it here, right? There is no marriage. There is no, we're going to be together in heaven forever. Yeah, you and billions of other people. And it's going to be a different kind of love because your attraction is going to be to the king, not to each other, right? So there is no marriage. So we're going to be like brother and sisters. I love my wife. I think we've 36 years of marriage, right? In a couple. Yeah, we'll be friendly, No kissing. No kissing. We're celebrating 36 here on the 10th, But I tell you what, when we get to heaven, I'll be like, hey, Marsh, how you doing? Oh my God. What I'm saying is there is no marriage. So for a theology to be taught, for people to be told, hey, you will see them again in heaven and you'll be reunited with them, you're not really doing them a service because you're pulling them away from who God is and who Christ is. Does that make sense? While it's comforting, and yes, it is comforting because you want to comfort people, right? That is wrong theology, right? The other theology, right, when he's talking about, he says, there's no new marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. There's something very touchy about that comment, because they're not saying that people are going to be angels in heaven. They're going to be like angels in that there is no marriage. So it's still the same context of marriage. So what does that mean? That people who die before you don't go up there and watch over you as an angel, okay? That is also a wrong theology. I know it's difficult to hear and it's difficult to understand, right? And to be honest with you, anybody that goes before me, I don't want them looking down on me. I want them to focus, right? So the angels themselves, that is a bad theology, right? So this is kind of common. He goes, and I read this today, so I have to put it on here. To my dear angel in heaven, I just want you to know that you're always in my thoughts and how much I love you so. I know you are in God's care. That is how it should be. But when I get to heaven, he will give you back to me. Right? Man, that's beautiful. Poetry. It is gorgeous. And it is meant to, to help someone in their grieving process, right? And you don't want to be that person. Nah, they're not, But at some point, people have to realize the truth. The truth is, first of all, if that person's in heaven, they're in a much better place than we are. You know what I'm saying? And we can't wait to get there, right? As a matter of fact, and I joke about this to my wife. Sometimes when I see a fellow believer go, I'm jealous because they're done. They're finished their race and I'm still here. We cry for them, cry for me because I'm still suffering here, man. He's done his race, So there's no angel looking down on you. Now there's angels separate from the people, right? Because God has his angels. Now there is an angel theology, but it's not your loved ones. Okay. So I hope I'm sorry if I did, right? So anyway, again, there is no resurrection. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what was spoken. The resurrection of the dead means that people are what? Alive, right? They didn't believe in the resurrection. And again, he quotes that in verse 32, right? Verse 32, I am the God of Abraham, right? He is actually quoting Exodus 3:6. Remember, this is Jesus' time, so he's quoting scripture, but he's talking in present tense. Do you guys get that? What does that mean? It means that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob are what? They're alive. Oh my God, how blasphemous is that? Right? They are alive, And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching, Boom, another one bites the dust, right? So the Sadducees, they got nowhere to go except, okay, never mind, Oh my goodness, So they move on. Yeah, they're alive. Say, well, So they move on. Let's read going because the next person's up, right? Right now they're 0-4 right now. They're 0-3 now. 0-3, okay? Maybe somebody else will get a win here in just a second. So let's read verses 34 to 40. I'm doing good on time too. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. They're going like this, right? They just can't get to this guy, right? Who else do we have out? Who's up next? Let's see. Bring that bat up, right? Are you a baseball fan? No?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
all right.
Touchdown. Who's going to get the next touchdown? Here we go, right here. All right. This guy might have it. He might. I'll give you a little hope. He might. Here we go. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Woo-hoo-hoo. I'll tell you what, this is coming from a lawyer, right? The lawyer who knows the law, right? So Jesus said to him, you shall love your Lord, the Lord your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and prophets. And prophets. I'll tell you what, there's two kinds of lawyers in this world, right? Those who know the law and those who know the judge. Okay? It's very, very simple, okay? So he turns it around. They wanted him to pick which is the greatest commandment, okay? Now remember, we think of commandments, we think of 10, right? They don't have 10. They have how many again? 613 laws, right? So it's saying a lawyer going, okay, which one of them is the most important one, right? Which one? And he gives them an answer, or he gives him an answer. Now remember, the Pharisees are listening to this, right? So he says to him, what does he say? It's also found in, by the way, in Mark 12. Love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And then the second like it is what? Love your neighbor as yourself. We break it down as love God, love others. Love God, love, what was that now?
All people.
Yeah, all peoples, right? Right? And here's the thing. On this, Jesus is not just speaking to speak. He's talking to the lawyer. So what do you have to do with a lawyer? You have to talk law. So what is he doing? He's actually quoting those two from Deuteronomy and Leviticus. So he's bringing proof on proof, you know? These are the two things that you know of. You're a lawyer, so you know what you're talking about. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. And then he says, what? On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. In other words, you fulfill those two, and all those 613 laws fall right in there, right? The problem with us, and the problem with them at the time, is more with us, is that we take those two and we say, love your God with all your soul, with all your might, with all your strength and power, and then love others as yourself. And we tend to elevate this, love others, before we do this. And you really can't do this without loving God, right? You do a disservice to people by saying God loves you. Oh yeah, the love God, yeah, but everything falls on that. And then because of that, you have the results that you can love others the proper way, right? So it's important, right? So when he breaks it down like that, and he says the greatest commandment, everything that you have read, everything that you know, all those fall under these two. And you can hang your hat on these two, on everything the prophets have said and everything that the law has said, right? You can hang them on that. So a lawyer is being convinced otherwise, right? And it says this, it doesn't show it here, but in Mark 34, it says this, when Jesus saw that the man had answered wisely, he said, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And no one dared to ask him any further questions. In other words, the lawyer in Mark says, you are correct. The lawyer affirmed. And it's cool because it showed in Mark, they don't show it in Matthew, but the lawyer confirmed. And again, who's watching this? The Pharisees, right? The lawyer says, Rabbi, you are right. And for Jesus to turn around and confirm him, that's a belief. And because of that, you are closer than these Nimrods right here. You are closer, So it's great, right? So basically at that point in time, that's 0-4, right? No matter who they put up, they just can't get it done, right? They cannot get it done because what? The Pharisees just couldn't what? Handle the truth, right? They're like, oh no, So they stopped asking questions, right? But did it stop there? Oh no, he wasn't going to let them get away at that point in time. It's like, no, this is too good right here. Hold on, before you leave, 0-4, before you leave, let's do the coup de grace right here, right? So 41-46, are you ready? Here we go, okay? Again, Jesus is not done. This is the best part. It says, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, before they departed, it should have said, right? Before they were about to go away like roaches, right? While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, saying, what do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? They said to him, the son of David. And he said to them, how then does David in the spirit call him Lord, saying, the Lord said to my Lord. Again, key word right there. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore, right? So, It's like, so what now, fellas? Is basically what it's saying. You've asked me, now let me ask you a question, okay? Before you disperse, let me ask you a question. And what is he? He goes right for the jugular, right? What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? Now, we just read in this chapter, the previous chapter, and the chapter before, all these parables, and all they talk about is the kingdom and how they are basically the people that are rejecting and what they do in that rejection, right? So he's already pointed that out. He's already, and there's a lot more parables coming, but he's already pointed that out. So he's already put them on that, hey, I got your number, right? So it says, what do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? Again, going back to the law, okay? Who is the Christ? Who is the son? Who does the law says the son is? And they can only answer it one way, the son of David, right? The son of David. Okay, if he is the son of David, then, why does David call him Lord? Okay, real quick, I just want to take you, right? Why does David call him Lord? He is the son of David. This is just a brief breakdown of the family line. Very brief, okay? Kind of give you an idea of why he is the son of David. Matter of fact, this kind of breaks it down a little more, and it shows you how both Joseph and Mary are in that Davidic line, right? So just kind of give you an example there. So again, the answer, the son of David. So if David calls him Lord, how can he be David's son? If David calls him Lord, he is in the lineage, he is further down, right? And in those times, they call son, whether they were immediate sons or not, they were part of that lineage, they were sons. So how is he calling his son Lord, right? And it is by divine inspiration, and the Trinity is set there in fact, right? Because he repeats in verse 44, he repeats what Psalm 110 is, right? So this was repeated. This was inspiration that David received of the Spirit of the God that calls Christ the Lord. In other words, he had that inspiration revelation that the lineage was going to reveal a Messiah, in fact, right? And it is written down in the law, right? So again, if David calls him Lord, how can it be after the answer who the son will be, right? And the way we break this down, and this is great. The way we break this down is this, okay? The answer to that question right there, if David calls him Lord, how is he his son, okay? There's a lot of things that we don't understand. We really don't. and we're not meant to maybe fully understand. Some of us get revealed revelation. Some of us, understand more than others. But there's going to be a point in time when we are all together and it's all going to make sense. But in this setting here, here's the answer, right? The Messiah will not only be a descendant of David, but also will be the Son of God. That is the foretelling. That is the prophecy, right? So we know that because it is written in the law. Okay, this makes him both David's sons and the Lord. Okay, so it is a Davidic prophecy. Okay, the fact that Jesus is Messiah as well as the Son of God makes him divine. Again, prophecy fulfilled. And he's telling these Pharisees, here I am in front of you, right? That which you read, oh, have you not read? Here I am in front of you, right? This is the truth the Pharisees and other religious leaders will willfully, notice the word willfully, miss, right? Because it is going against what their comfort is, perhaps, right? Now, it is a cornerstone in their commitment to condemn him for blasphemy, because that's exactly what they're doing. They don't believe him. They don't want to believe him, even though they read about it, right? They don't want to believe him. They know, they've seen the miracles. They heard all this stuff. They know that he is a descendant of David, but they don't want to believe it. They don't want to willfully do it. And here's the kicker, guys. Here's the kicker. And this was the very truth they refused to hear, and the very claim they needed to have Jesus killed. Because this to them can actually put it into that blasphemy circle. This is what they were looking for. This is the entire thing. So even in their attempts to try to trip him up didn't happen, they're still collecting this data. It is still blasphemous because he still keeps claiming that he is not only the Son of God, but he is God himself, right? He is God himself. And no one was able to answer him a word. Not from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore. Basically, what do? They got wised up and said, you know what? I ain't saying nothing anymore. My actions are going to show something else, but we're going to stop speaking at this point in time. Now, I'm going to put this up here because she passed away this week, but I think it's great, right? We're done. We're done, right? I think that's good, right? And that's what the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the lawyer went, actually, when you think about it, the lawyer with what Jesus confirming something, probably went even happier, but not, he's still a lawyer. But this is a situation now because now the things turn, okay? Now we're in that Passion Week and things are going to turn bad for Jesus, right? The Pharisees are going to turn up the heat. And when we get into chapter 23, we're going to start to see some things happening here, okay? So anyway, that is the end of chapter 22.